Charles Dickens, Oliver Twist and social reform. We often, rightly, see Charles Dickens as a social reformer. It's not hard, reading Oliver Twist, to see how he attacks the institution of the workhouse in the wake of the 1834 Poor Law Amendment Act, commonly known as the New Poor Law. Poor Oliver is mistreated from birth, denied affection, adequate nourishment and a basic education, and raised for nothing better than to do the most menial work. While other children die in parochial care or are farmed out to work as chimney sweeps, Oliver is lucky enough to escape from the tyranny of a parish upbringing and fall in with a gang of thieves, where he's at least fed and experiences some kind of camaraderie. Dickens's indictment of the workhouse is obvious, but can we see the other side of the coin? Can we see the extent to which Dickens accepts the status quo? Can we see how, far from criticising their complacency, he flatters his middle-class readership, reassures them that he believes they're good people who will want to do the right thing and support him in ending the iniquities of the workhouse system and the New Poor Law? Even more than that, can we see how Dickens not only accepts but also feeds the likely prejudices of his readers? That's more of a challenge. Let me give you a few hints. Here's one of the more obvious ones. It's pretty obvious, I think, that Fagin fits into a popular negative stereotype of Jewish people. This is something that Dickens was actually challenged on, as Susan Mayer explains. In 1863, Mrs. Davis, a Jewish acquaintance of Dickens's, wrote to complain politely about Fagin's characterization. It has been said that Charles Dickens, the large-hearted, whose works plead so eloquently and so nobly for the oppressed of his country, and who may justly claim credit as the fruits of his labour, the many changes for the amelioration of the condition of the poor now at work, has encouraged a vile prejudice against the despised Hebrew. In the light of this criticism, Dickens did modify his representation of Fagin somewhat in the 1867 edition of Oliver Twist, but the stereotype of the avaricious and criminally minded Jew, based, it seems, on a real-life character named Ike Solomons, who happened to be Jewish, is too central to the story to be eradicable. What other examples can we find of Dickens perpetuating stereotypes in Oliver Twist? Let's look at another example. These characters are perhaps less instantly recognisable than Fagin. They are Noah Claypole and Charlotte, servants of Mr. Sowerbury, the undertaker, to whom Oliver is apprenticed after he asks for more. The scene where he asks for more is also relevant here. In what way do you think Dickens's representations of Noah and Charlotte and the workhouse cook, along with others, Mr. Bumble, Mrs. Mann, Mrs. Thingamy, also known as Old Sally, and others from Oliver's early years, perpetuate negative stereotypes? Well, they're all fairly low class. Mr. Bumble, as the beadle, is in a position of authority over Oliver, but we can see that he's much lower in status than the members of the parish board. But they're not just low class. They're also mean to Oliver and the other children raised by the parish. They mistreat them, they bully them. Mrs. Mann appropriates to herself most of the money allotted to paying for the upkeep of the children in her care. Old Sally steals Oliver's mother's locket, thus depriving Oliver of the chance to be reunited with his family, and so on. The message is clear. The lower classes are unremittingly nasty. That brings me to the next point. Can you see how Mr. Brownlow feeds into Dickens's readers' prejudices and preconceptions? Mr. Brownlow is a gentleman. He is also, with one or two minor exceptions, the first person to show Oliver any real kindness. And he is, in a very real sense, the reader. It's no accident that he makes his first appearance outside a bookshop, that he asks Oliver, "How should you like to grow up a clever man and write books, eh?" Or that it is as a result of his sending Oliver to return books to the bookshop that Oliver is recaptured by Sikes and Nancy and taken back to Fagin. Dickens wants his readers to see themselves in Mr. Brownlow. After the schemers, the bullies and the hypocrites who have plagued Oliver's early years, here finally is someone who simply wants to do the decent thing, to be a good person, to help Oliver. In this way, Dickens flatters his readers, charitably assumes that their failure to do anything to relieve the plight of parish children like Oliver is simply because they are unaware of it, and that they will, of course, take steps to do something about it now that they know the truth. So we have an antisemitic portrayal of a Jewish character, an array of brutal and charmless poor people, and a kindly, well-intentioned gentleman with whom the reader can identify. Last but not least, there is Oliver himself. In what way does the poor, mistreated Oliver reinforce social stereotypes? Can you think of anything? Well, the main point here is that Oliver is not just one more parish orphan. As the story develops, we become more and more aware that Oliver is not just a poor boy from the lower classes. He's from a fairly well-to-do family. He's not low-born. He's just fallen through the cracks, from his rightful station in life to the world of the workhouse and the street gang. If Oliver were just another urchin from the lower classes, Dickens's readers would not have been interested in him. The interest in the story lies in rescuing Oliver from the depths to which, through no fault of his own, he has fallen, and restoring him to his rightful station in life. Dickens buys lock, stock and barrel into the myth of breeding and good blood here. Even before Oliver's elevated family background emerges, he's set apart from the other poor people around him. He's received no formal education, so there's no reason to suppose that his speech would be any more formal than that of other lower class characters in the novel, such as Noah Claypole. But whereas Noah speaks like a gutter snipe, "Workhouse, don't be impudent. Your mother too, she was a nice one, she was. Oh, law." Oliver never speaks anything other than standard English. "There, that's enough. Don't say anything more to me about her. You'd better not." Later on, in Fagin's hideout, Oliver is given a book to read. He remained lost in thought for some minutes, and then, with a heavy sigh, snuffed the candle and, taking up the book which the Jew had left with him, began to read. He turned over the leaves, carelessly at first, but lighting on a passage which attracted his attention, he soon became intent upon the volume. It was a history of the lives and trials of great criminals, and the pages were soiled and thumbed with use. Here he read of dreadful crimes that made the blood run cold, of secret murders that had been committed by the lonely wayside. It's as if the attributes of the affluent, fine-sounding accents, the ability to read, are part of Oliver's genetic makeup, despite his having received no education and being raised in the lowest ranks of society. In all these ways, making his central villain Jewish, making his poor characters vicious and unlovely, giving the reader a kindly gentleman with whom to identify, and making his protagonist not a poor boy but a high-born one who has fallen to the bottom of society, Dickens panders to his readers' prejudices and preconceptions. But why? The answer to that is, quite simply, that he is a very clever writer. He knows that if he were to challenge his readers on all fronts, they would not want to read his books. So he takes one specific issue, the new poor law, and he directs his attack on that, compromising on other fronts in order to keep his readership on board. Or perhaps it wasn't as calculated as that, and he just hit on that approach by chance. If so, it was a very lucky chance, as evidenced by the fortunes of Henry Mayhew, another reformist writer of Dickens's day. Mayhew's London Labour and the London Poor is unsurpassed as an account of the lives of the lower classes in Victorian England, but he lacked Dickens's ability to engage the sympathies of the reader, and never received the popular acclaim that Dickens did. I'm inclined to think that the difference between Mayhew and Dickens in this respect is more than just lucky chance on Dickens's part. I think Dickens knew how to pick his battles. In other novels, he challenges the very stereotypes he condones or even appears to subscribe to in Oliver Twist. Mr. Rhea, a Jewish character in Our Mutual Friend, is virtuous and admirable, everything Fagin is not. Several of Dickens's novels feature characters who are both lowly born and virtuous, among them Bob Cratchit in A Christmas Carol, and, conversely, Bentley Drummle in Great Expectations is an example of a high-born character with a low nature. But in Oliver Twist, he focuses his attack on the new poor law, on the fact that an orphan child has a better chance with a criminal gang on the streets than in a parish workhouse. And to get that message across, he compromises, feeding some of the prejudices of his readers in order the better to convince them on this one point.